East Forest, my man, welcome.
Thank you.
How have you been? We last connected pretty much exactly a year ago, right before you were getting ready for your
Mm.
Australian tour. And I mean, of course, so much has happened since then. And there were the bushfires in Australia. I'd love to know how that tour ended up being for you, for starters, and the year unfolding. I mean, whew.
Yeah, it seems like ages ago that tour happened. That was the last thing I got to do, like a last official tour. And I remember it being a pretty ecstatic experience for Rada and I traveling around. Like, I honestly didn't know if I had community there. And so I was had such a warm welcome that it made me want to come back. And we had plans. We started making plans to come back. But as you know, I mean, by the time we landed back in the States at the end of February, I think that was right when like a few COVID cases had appeared on a Tiger Air flight in Australia, like that same couple days, and it all just went from there. So
Mhm.
things have been pushed, but we certainly look forward to coming back. Um,
Yeah, people have been talking about it, man. So you definitely have strong community over here. So when the
yeah.
time's right. But yeah, same. We got back from the States early March, from Hawaii to here, and literally the last flight available left to come back.
Wow.
And yeah, it was trippy times, and I mean still is, but hard to believe it's been a year. It feels like it's been
No.
kind of like shorter at the same time way longer. It's a weird paradoxical feeling to me.
Yeah, yeah, a lot's happened, and I get the sense that a lot more is going to happen, and that we've got more fire to burn and more hurdles to go through. I suppose that's always the case on the human journey. It just feels very truncated right now. It sort of feels very potent, and I think that's sort of, in essence, what we signed up for. I mean, if you think back to 2012, and I don't know what it was like for you, but yeah, over here, the years leading up to that, there was a lot of talk in sort of new age metaphysical circles about what is this, and the Mayan prophecies and the coming change and the age of
Yeah.
Aquarius. And these are all things that people really wanted. And they deeply wanted change in their heart. And they thought maybe this is finally the time. And for some, it felt like a bit of a letdown in a sense. Like
Yeah, I remember that.
the moment of the the winter or summer solstice for you came and went. And but I would contend it didn't. I would say this is it. We're just now ramping into what is it might feel like that was a long time ago, but in cosmic terms, it's not at all.
Mhm.
It's a blip, 4 years or sorry, 9 years. So we're really ramping into this cycle of transformation, and whether it has anything to do with ancient indigenous prophecy, seeing that on the horizon, you can't deny that what we're going through is a time of intense change and transformation that's calling forth the best of all of us, and individually being able to step into this. Not to say that anyone's needs to walk through this perfectly. When I say walk through it with grace, I just mean that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to have good days. Um, we need to have that full spectrum of the human experience, but I think it does call on a lot of us to level up in whatever ways we're able to.
Couldn't agree more. I can't help but remember back at those 2012 days as well. I was doing a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies, and there was a lot of conversation around that build up to the end of 2012, and a lot of shamans and facilitators and teachers were talking it up. And there was a letdown, and I even remember certain teachers getting a lot of flack, getting given a lot of shit for how much they did talk it up, and then the inevitable letdown. So possibly there was a bit of naivety there, possibly a bit of misinterpretation, possibly, like you said, it's just a blip. Maybe we're still on that ride, whether it was meant to be in that moment, on that summer solstice, on that winter solstice, the end of the world and the start of new Aquarian
Yeah,
beginnings, or we're still through that purification. It seems to be the case, but
sure. There was an eagerness,
right,
and I will say I can applaud people's eagerness to get
good.
on with something better. I mean, no doubt we all want that in our hearts.
Yeah.
On that evening, we were actually in Southern Utah doing a ceremony, and I remember I recorded it, and it became my album called Prana. So
Wow, okay.
Prana was recorded. We had this idea. We're gonna do a psilocybin ceremony, and I'll play the music, and I'll guide us through. And who knows what'll happen, as we cross into the time. But that's what we're doing in that exact moment, and we have a testament to that moment in time, at least for us, which is kind of nice.
That's amazing. Well, so do we. I mean, that's when Joe and I really came together, was on that evening, on that night
There
during
you
an
go.
yeah, and we literally had the vision of Soleil, our first daughter. And for me, it was the end. It was the end of the old me, big time. So we attest to that as it was huge. It was massive, and we took it seriously. We really took it earnestly. All the alignments going on, all the people sitting in ceremony that night collectively. There was definitely power to it, and for me, it changed the game big time.
Well, I'm glad you had your ascension. Sounds
Yeah,
like
I
it worked.
mean, yeah, in one way or another, for me, it was a grounding experience rather than ascension. It was like from these years of like trying to ascend to
Yeah.
like not you're here, you're becoming a dad, you're boom, and like that it was grounding for me, huh?
Big surprise that the aha moment is, oh, you're supposed to be human on this earth.
Yeah,
Wait a minute. Why am I here? I'm supposed to do this human thing? Give me a
yeah.
break. Yeah.
That was it, huh? But for you, 2020, I mean, you've gotten used to touring a lot and that being a part of your game and how you make a living and you're one of your roles of service. How did you find like adapting to that? And were there any challenges that, yeah, please just speak to your journey of 2020.
Well, I wish I could say it was a smooth ride, but it was bumpy at first and it's gotten a lot smoother. Yeah, the rug completely got pulled out from under me just in all the ways we all shared, but then in particularly with my work because I couldn't do what was bringing in at that time 50% of my income too. Not to mention I quickly discovered as the months went by, it was a real energetic exchange that I was missing and that nourished me. It's like, oh, I never got off that treadmill, but now I'm realizing what I lack by not being able to share this process of creativity moving through you that you share with someone else or a group of people, and they sort of process it. And then there's this yin yang energy of performing that is really sacred and powerful, and it can be really nourishing. Of course, all the other things outside that heightened moment of performing, the traveling and the getting here and there, and that's incredibly not nourishing. It's like draining. So I also found that not having to do that was a big relief. And I got to be honest, I don't think I ever would have gotten off that energy unless the entire world said, you can't do it. Like, all right, well, okay, if you say so. But I mean, it'd be much worse if it's like for some reason I couldn't do it, but everyone else could. It'd be harder to let go of. So, in a sense, it's easier to get on board with what is when we're all going through it. And that was a big lesson to me. But I had to reorient, and I consider myself very grateful for many reasons because I was in a relationship with Rada, and so that was there, and that was something to lean into. It's not like I was trying to date or something in COVID. That'd be horrible. And I had this studio that I'm sitting in now that I just finished in right before I went to Australia, building myself. And that was like a huge, huge win for me to have a place to now work during the time. And because I'm largely a solo artist, I could continue recording and mixing and working and producing. I couldn't like hire friends and musicians in the same way I used to at first. But I started doing virtual ceremonies. A friend of mine, the same guy who kicked me into doing this kind of work many years ago, my friend Lewis, he did it again. He decided reached out right there. It was early March, and he's like, "I'm thinking of putting together a ceremony this weekend. You could play on like live. We'll stream it." I was like, "I don't even know how to stream, man. I don't even know how to do this." And he's like, "Oh, you'll figure it out." Blah blah blah. And it just sort of happened, and I started streaming live on YouTube, doing these sort of medicine ceremonies for the world. Anyone who wanted to tune in, and I didn't know if that would work. I didn't know anything. It was a very strange feeling too, but we did 5 of them over the weeks and months, and it became kind of a thing. And actually, before we got on this call, I was sitting here going through those 5 different ceremonies. It's like 20 hours of material or something, and sort of trying to find gems in it and create another sort of volume 2 of Music for Mushrooms album, because I feel like in those moments where you're improvising and you're in that medicine space, that's where I would pull the material, literally the recordings for those albums. But I never thought it would be virtual. And I love records when they're a moment in time. And so we have these virtual ceremonies that created this music that can now be turned into potentially more music, in a sense, records. So it's a transmutation, and I find that this time has been a lot about sort of trying to find the diamonds in the rough and finding new advantages. Like now, that was all hard, but now I'm also doing these sort of ceremonies that people are doing in different countries here and there, and like, well, that never could have happened before. So there's pluses and minuses. And I also made some major shifts on the business side of things and left like my management, and uh, so I kind of started fresh, and I'm still in a place of rebuilding my own core team, and that's been a beautiful and wild ride this whole year. But the last since our summer, since July, it's been I felt a lot stronger, and I felt a lot calmer. I'm still like I'm just not as heightened in the anxiety. It's more like I'm quite concerned and I pay attention to everything going on, and but I think I'm a bit more got that warrior energy a bit stronger.
Yeah, nice. Do you have any, have you had any go-to practices that have helped you navigate those times and adapt and work with the anxieties?
Going on walks is a big one for me. Yeah, especially in the summer. I
Mhm.
still do it in the winter, but I love just like I don't know why that helps clear my head, but I just like head out the door and just walk and walk and walk and walk. Um, and in our summer, we were doing some backpacking, a lot of hiking, and I was down in Boulder, Utah a lot, which was another advantage. I wasn't touring, so I could be down there a lot. And that it's
Mhm.
just like ridiculous nature. I mean, I just have a trailer down there in a sauna, so you're kind of outside all the time, and you're in the canyons and the mountains, and so that was very calming and nourishing. And my other main practice is just being creatively active. So that helped me keep my head on straight to feel like I was staying on my sense of purpose. And just exercising that muscle of creativity is really what keeps me sane. So again, having a place to work and honestly having community out there to listen and be in conversation energetically that way, I'm so grateful for. It's such a godsend that I'm able to make stuff at home and other people listen to it. I know that sounds simple, but it's really something I don't take for granted.
No, for sure. I mean, obviously, it's a part of your role here on Earth, a part of your dharma, and it feeds you and it feeds other people. I mean, that's no surprise at all. If things came back to normal, like very soon, flights and everyone's flowing like as they were 2019, um, would you get back on the treadmill of what you were doing before?
I like to say not in the same way, and that's at least my plan. Um, I think I would approach traveling more like a journey now, and I think it would take a bit more for me to get up and go. I've had a couple inquiries, here and there. People are starting to ask about, May or the summer and stuff like that. And honestly, it just seems like the idea of packing it all up and getting on a plane and flying across the country and then doing the whole thing, going to a hotel and then setting up and then sound checking them and then coming back seems like this Herculean journey right now.
Agree.
It just
I
feels I'm like,
know.
wow, that seems massive.
Hmm.
So I don't feel that muscle is really like as primed as it was, but maybe that's good. It's because I also don't feel that deep need, like I have to always be running. So I think it'll be more like times that feel special or feel really appropriate or what's really calling me. And that remains to be seen what those things will be.
Hmm.
But just coming to Australia, like I remember the other side of that coin is that like that was a huge trip for me, and it was a big risk. And I was really on the fence and really close to the last minute we were going to pull the plug for boring reasons I won't go into. And I didn't do it. I ended up being like, screw it, let's hustle, let's do it, let's just step up. And it was great. It was great. So that is part of it. I mean, sometimes it is just hard work. You have to just, it's not like it's all easy. It is hard work. Any way you look at touring, it's tough. It really is. But it keeps certain things strong, and it's a way to connect with people, and it's a way to shake up just sort of your day to day being in one place, which but but I don't think I'll do it, certainly not blindly, and certainly not for just no reason. Yeah. Not that
Yeah.
it was
No, I hear you. There's a refinement. Maybe I mean, it's changed it for me as well. I mean, this is the longest I and we as a family haven't traveled for a decade at least. And
Yeah.
it the thought of it for me is quite overwhelming. The thought of doing that whole thing, which it became automatic almost before. It became very familiar and exciting, and the it's stressful though. Like when I really reflect back on that combination of packing and then thinking about everything you've packed, making sure you got
And what
everything, just that alone, and then getting to the airport, checking in, the whole security thing. Like there's a lot of adrenaline and stress involved, which you just get used to it. You kind of you just well, for me, I just associate that with the excitement of traveling. But every time when we finally get on the other side, we're fucked, we're it really takes it out. And not to mention the dynamics of flying in this bullet with you know, circular air, recycled air, or whatever they do. Um, it's a trippy situation, and it's changed my perception of it big time. So it's going to be interesting when we start to do it as well. I think we're going to weigh up the pros and cons and be a bit more refined in our choice of it too.
I mean, I guess I already am because those
Hmm.
couple of things that have come in, I've been definitely. I think there none of them will probably happen because I was sort of like, well, what about this? And I don't know. And I mean, add into your equation that you have a bunch of fragile equipment with you and you have to perform. And you're by yourself essentially. It's like there's no band to like lean on and I'm tired, man. You guys got to take it tonight. It's like this is it.
Mhm.
Um, it's scary sometimes, but it's exciting too.
Yeah.
And uh, so yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that turns out.
Hmm. How about any breakthroughs or big teachable moments? Does any stick out that you feel like sharing in which you've had big insights, big growth?
I had a I mean, I think if I were to ask for anything of myself moving forward, it's more trust.
Mhm.
Trust in kind of the unfoldment of things and what is in my life and not trying to manage it as much. Because I feel like what's the point? Am I really managing anything? I had a really powerful experience therapeutically at a ketamine clinic here. that Rada is a therapist at. And it wasn't something I had experience with as a medicine, but it was kind of like violently profound. Like it was sort of accidental how much the dose I had was just like it just threw me, it really threw me. It was an
High
intramuscular.
dose.
It was a yeah, and it was a shot. So which wasn't the plan, but long story short, it just came on like 1,000 million miles an hour, like 5 MEO DMT, just like boom, and just kept going higher and higher into like dimensions I didn't even know could exist. It just kept breaking my concept of consciousness and energy and everything. And I didn't know like that day that was even a potential. Like I didn't walk into it like I would walk into a mushroom journey or ayahuasca and think like, hey man, anything can happen and I'm here and I'm calling on my spirit guides and all these things. I was just kind of casual. I was like, oh,
Right.
this will just be relaxing, be great. And as it started just piercing through layer after layer of dimensional reality, I remember at first thinking like, oh my God, it's going to go there. Like a place I'd been before. We're going psychedelic. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, you can't fight it. Okay, it's cool. And then it's kept going. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's going like past like, oh my God, am I going to die? Is it one of these things? And then it goes past that into like, wait a minute, what is even time and what is anything? And what is, am I, am I even here anymore? And then it goes past that into like, I remember thinking
Wow.
like I needed something to hang on to and of just like what's happening. And I remembered numbers, that numbers existed. That's a thing in the universe. And I was like, okay, I feel like if I, something to do with numbers, if I can think about that or hold a number or count maybe, then I can breathe with that, or it really blew me open. But the reason I tell you this is because afterwards, I felt terrible. But after 48 hours, I really started to feel profoundly better. And I don't know why. And I don't know if it was just that or things started to shift in my life anyway, but I, I just didn't feel as activated by everything. I felt way more grounded. I felt way more open. I felt like I crossed through some kind of, like there was a before and now there was an after. It's like, well, that happened, and I changed me, and I don't understand all of how it changed me, but I feel it. And I think there's a parallel to what's happening in the COVIDian era is that we can sense that it has changed us. And some of us might say, I don't know how. I don't know
Mm.
what I want to do differently. But there's a trust in there for you to say, but I can feel that change is becoming. I can feel that change is in motion, and I'm on board with that change, and I trust that I can handle that change, and I'm in it. I am the change. And so I think it just taught me about what my mind knows and sort of what my heart knows. And I had that understanding before, but it was a more visceral experience of that. And I feel like it's still unfolding. Of course, it always is. But right now, I feel very much alive in this process. And it feels vulnerable, but it also feels stronger. And there's some relationship there. I mean, how about yourself?
I'll share in a bit, but I want to, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I don't know much about ketamine. I keep hearing it come up. It's not very prevalent here. And definitely, well, as far as I'm aware, not done in like a supported kind of formal uh, format like that, like what Rada's doing. So I am curious, for starters, about ketamine. I haven't done it. I find that very interesting. And yeah, going into a lot of these psychedelic ceremonies with intention and like reverence and like you said, calling upon your support, your spirit guides and whatnot, versus going in like, got this, relaxed, and then just
That
it
was
being
that's the
so
oldest
massive.
mistake in the book.
Yeah,
It's the hubris of like that was my fault of not doing my research about what the
right.
reality was of this work. But you get it handed to you usually when that happens.
Yeah, but I do keep hearing about it, so I am curious. And I think that sparked even more curiosity to research it, because I have heard profound breakthroughs and healings of depression, anxiety, PTSD, addictions, and all of that very, very quickly.
Yeah, for me, I
Mm.
think it helped with anxiety and feelings of depression for sure.
Hmm.
Um, and that's sort of what I was dealing with the early parts of COVID, a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
You
But
know,
yeah,
I
you
think,
asked me any big breakthroughs. Is that what you're asking, or big
yeah,
challenges?
I
Um,
guess they usually go together.
you know what? The one of the biggest challenges was early on, like when we first came back, we back to Australia, we quarantined for a couple of weeks, and that was actually really beautiful. We just thankfully so grateful we're set up with a nice place, and it's very spacious, a lot of light, and we can get outside, and we were grateful. We looked at it as a retreat and just grounded and did our practices and made art, and it was really actually quite utopian and beautiful. And but then as the last day of our quarantine, my dad came down with what looked like COVID, and all the symptoms just went down really fucking quick. And that night, all of a sudden, was in the COVID ICU. And my mum called me saying he might not make it through the night. Um, that was challenging and very strange, yet very deep and beautiful as well. Like again, that paradoxical, like, fuck, this sucks. Like, I just want to go see him and be with him. And so couldn't be with the family, couldn't be with him. And I just went straight to the altar and just went so deep, so deep. Um, Falling upon everything, and haven't cried that much. Oh, probably a couple of times, but just a lot of crying, a lot of chanting, a lot of breathing deep, and that combination of both like frustrated and sad and mourning, but also like really going deep with your soul and love. And so that was both challenging and beautiful. And then he went on a full journey. He was in ICU with what ended up to not be COVID, according to the tests. So he got moved to the general ward. After a couple of weeks, we could go see him. And that was a real trip, going in with the family eventually. And just watching him, because a big part of the challenge of keeping him alive was that he is obese. He is very, very obese, and there was too much weight that was inhibiting them getting oxygen in. So they were really having trouble keeping him alive because of the weight, literally. But they eventually did. He was on the ventilators for weeks, and
Wow.
so that was yeah, yeah. It was big. And Cam and I, my brother and I, we were already very close. But each day we would meet up in this park adjacent to the hospital and just go deep together and do some yoga and do some kriyas and breathing techniques and connect with nature and just really go deep and like and rally dad on, like, come on dad, you got this, like you can, may this be like a blessing to wake you up, and just going deep, deep, deep. And so through that, my brother and I got really beautiful, like even closer, like boom. And so what's come into fruition from that is my brother and I have been doing some great work together and teaching together. And I do feel that that big challenge helped our relationship come into a deeper kind of blossoming, and that's coming out into the community as well. But yeah, those couple months of being by dad's side in ICU, again, both really challenging and sad. And it pushed me into places of deep reflection and deep process. But it was also really beautiful. And then seeing him come out he did come out, and he is out now and functioning. And he was very inspired, you know, uh, very inspired. Okay, gonna get the weight off. Um, we even gave him extra motivation, like when you do get down to 100 kilograms, we'll buy you a ticket to Maui and just celebrate life, you know. And he was pumped. And it's just interesting watching how thick those old patterns of conditioning are, because that initial inspiration is high. Like I nearly died, and the journey he went through, and the inspiration that came through that, and then gradually just kind of back into the grooves of familiarity and conditioning. And so that's been challenging for
Right.
sure, you know, like really trying to motivate him, um, yet observing how thick those conditioned patterns are. So there's both a angst to help him out, yet compassion, you know, just like everyone's on their own journey. Got to give them space and support, but you can't force anyone into anything really. Everyone's on their own journey. So that was really revealing. That would have been the kind of highlight for me in terms of what pushed me into growing up even more and waking up even more, and also being available in both a motivating way and supportive way, and giving people space, and just loving on them even if they're not changing the way I want them to change, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to everyone's it's also just the judgment that a different kind of journey is somehow better. It's if you look
Mhm.
at it from a karmic perspective, it's like who am I to say that he's not exactly where he needs to be or chose to be? It's I don't know. So I mean, all you can do is sort of love them.
Totally.
But did he have any memories of that time when he was unconscious or on a ventilator?
We keep asking him because I am so curious about that realm of being in a coma for that long. um, and he describes like very trippy dreams, and he doesn't know if that was when he was starting to come to, and they got him off the ventilator, and he was starting to come to, because on a conscious level he describes that period a lot when he got moved to the general ward and got off the life support. He describes that period a lot. There was a lot of trippy dreams going on, but I don't think there's much recognition of when he was in the actual coma.
I'm sure time gets all screwed up and your memory
Mhm.
starts totally faded and messed up too. I was just curious.
Yeah, so am I. It's such a mystery how, like, how they're able to keep the body alive and supported, yet just hanging on by a thread. Like, what is consciousness doing in that moment? And I've been put under many general anesthetics, actually, like through a lot of injuries, um, and the last one I did, I just got so tripped out by it, like more than ever, probably because of the work I've been doing and just exploring consciousness. I'd never even thought about it when I used to get them as a teenager and in my young 20s. But the more recent one, a couple years ago, when I got shoulder surgery, I was really tripping out, contemplating like what what happens when they pretty much like yeah, go under that general anesthetic. Does it freeze consciousness, or where does consciousness go?
You
Um,
you look over at the anesthesiologist, you're like, "Who is this shaman? Who is that
yeah,
witch over there?" Yeah.
totally.
"Where are
Yeah.
you
Have you?
taking me?"
Yeah. Trippy. Have you experienced the general anesthetic?
Yeah, that's the good
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, I've had
Yeah.
surgery, unfortunately, in my life, and,
Hmm.
that stuff is powerful.
Powerful.
I remember having surgery on my arm. I had a broken arm a couple times, and I had to have some hardware taken out, and it's the only time the surgery was sort of elective in a sense, and so, having to choose it was really hard, and I was very nervous, and when I walked in, I mean, it'd been built up for months, and I was like, "Man, I'm really nervous about what's about to happen." She's like, "Oh, don't worry about it, because before you go in, about an hour before, I give you what I call the courage shot, and you'll be fine." And she put that stuff in my veins, and I was like, totally. I was like, "Oh, it's all good. It's fine." I
What's the courage shot? I haven't heard
don't
that.
remember much after that, to be honest. It was like, yeah, it was just like
Bit of
sedative,
morphine or okay.
something that just chills you out. And
Yeah.
um, but I don't do well with anesthesia, and ketamine is used for that for I think like horses and kids or something. And
Okay.
so I get similar symptoms with it where I get like nauseous afterwards, and
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely have to pay attention to, the
Yeah.
after experience.
It's a journey. I mean, what dad was on, the combination of drugs and what they were pumping him full of as well, like to keep him alive and to get him out of there. And then the steroids. I mean, the amount of steroids to help kick the body into healing. So even just even just that integration, like observing it, like because he was running high when he first came out, because he was on a shitload of steroids, like just pumped. And observing it, it seems similar to going on an epic journey, or like weeks of journeying with psychedelics. And then what? And then the re-entry, the re-entry phase. And it seems like there could be room for a bit more like support in re-entry, because it's a trip people go on when nearly dying, being on life support, being pumped full of those drugs, and then, all right, bye for now.
And I hope we take that analogy into going through a pandemic, and
Right.
as we essentially slowly emerge out of it, that we have that similar mindset of support and integration.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point of it? It's like, what's the point of the psychedelic work if you don't try to bring it into your life? We've had this great left turn. So, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about mainly the blessings that have come through it, and how to look at it uh, positively, if possible, when possible. But fuck, it's been deeply challenging, and the amount of people that have lost work, lost loved ones, lost their mind, really, especially in the US and Europe. I mean, in many parts of the world. I keep saying it, like here, it really does feel like we're in a bubble. It's been quite interesting being here, in which there hasn't been a case in quite a while. We're able to live relatively normal lives, and we've been teaching in community. I had an event on last Friday with my brother, in which there were 30 plus people in the room, mat to mat, like it's pretty normal, and people are going out and yet observing the world. It's very interesting from this isolated perspective. It's
The
really
fucking
trippy.
yeah.
Yeah, it almost doesn't seem real. And with that, which I'm sure you're observing, is uh, a lot of conspiracy theories, but a lot of even like this is a hoax. Like this isn't even happening. And I think it's easy from our vantage point, when we don't know anyone that's had it. It's very distant, um, to think it's just all fake and a hoax and a control trip from the government. And I'd love to hear your view on like like there's so many different conspiracy theories, and then there's even like conflicts between those different conspiracy theories, and all this kind of toxic tribalism and outrage. It's very interesting, even just on that front. What are you seeing in that regard? Like I see you as a very like a voice of reason, and able to kind of tease through the madness quite a bit. What are your views on it all?
It's a really uh, nuanced and complicated subject. It sort of like depends on what part of it we want to talk about, because
Yeah.
um, I think it on some level harkens back to the change that I referenced that we're going through as a people, as a civilization, and it's a symptom of that. Yet it also seems to be intimately related to our relationship to technology and how we consume information and receive information, and sort of the way we weave truth and weave stories has become so loose
Mm.
that it's no longer it's we're very blind, a lot of folks, to the stories that are being woven into their minds and how those are affecting their choices that they think they're making with free will. But it sort of, you have to go back many cycles to find where that original choice was that set them on the path of believing all sorts of things that create divisiveness and create a sense of increasing the divide of us versus them. And it I don't think we're, someone like Donald Trump is a court jester who came in with this giant mirror and says, you literally created me, and now I will just sit here and pour gas on everything, and you guys will light it. And there was a deep desire, it seemed like, at least in this country, to again, it was that same wanting of change, and I think it manifested on the left as Bernie Sanders, sort of something outside the system, so to speak, that was progressive, and on the right is Donald Trump. And they were both things that were not representing what they saw as sort of a sham, and not just to truncate this down to a political situation, because it's not. It's it's I've been feeling that it's people all yearning for a more beautiful world. They're just going about it in such different ways. I would argue all of us are doing that with every action we take. It's a way to return to God, whether it's football or heroin or church or yoga or food or sex. All of it's sort of ways to deal with the feelings of separateness, of being in this conundrum and this mystery of incarnation. And so I look at a lot of folks who have gone further and further down these rabbit holes as fairly lost, but that's not to say that you can't be lost in the dogmatism of a mainstream story too. Uh, but I'm not at all saying that, like, it's just become so pointedly important. It's one thing to have a crazy idea. It's another thing where it's in a public health emergency where your choices now hurt other people. I mean, it's just so unique what we've gone through and are going through. And I'm disheartened by the lack of compassion by a lot of my brothers and sisters out there who feel so threatened by something like wearing a mask in public spaces. It's like, honestly, what's the big deal? I understand you might not like it, or even if you do disagree with it, is it really then still that big a deal? Or, like, it's odd that there's groups of people who are relatively relaxed about catching coronavirus, but they're really fearful of receiving a vaccine. You know, it's like everything's kind of gone topsy turvy in ways I think a lot of us never thought it could. And that is disappointing, to be sure, but I also think it is a symptom of the change. And I remember talking about this with friends back in the whole 2012 thing, that when you see, let's just call it, energies of positive change happening, there's probably going to be an equal and opposite reaction of, let's call it, negative, disruptive, destructive, sort of Kali energy. And that makes sense. It's sort of physics. It seems like that's the operating system we live in. It's just law. Well, maybe that's good news then. If we're burning the fields, as it were, there's something else rising alongside that, and perhaps it's the only way. You talked about the journey that you're dad went on and wanting him to change. And I, of course, understand that desire. And then us also saying like the stories of Ram Dass when Maharaji told him his mom was this really high soul. And he's just dumbfounded, like, what the hell? How is that possible? She's like my nebbish mother from New Hampshire or wherever. And then it really hit him that he's like, what do I know? Maybe she's taking this whole incarnation, or a big thing she's doing is playing a role for me. And how beautiful is that? I was like, I won't pretend to understand the infinite complexity of the webs of the dances we're all doing together to make this art piece that is uh, humanity and the world and consciousness blossoming forward. So, but that doesn't abscond me from responsibility of my choices. And that is part of the mystery itself. And that was something that came front and center in the racial justice movements that we went through all around the world, but particularly here in the States, of facing these ideas of what it means to be an ally, but then be anti-racist and what differences are and so forth and so on, or what is privilege and what privilege do I have and what is my responsibility to that. And you get into the spiritual community and the choices and non-choices we make and our responsibility about the information that we put out and also the information we don't put out. And uh, I think these are important subjects. And more than anything, I think it's good for us to, as I've been saying, sharpen the blade, especially in the spiritual community, because it's been pretty loose. And it's okay to say I don't know, and it's okay to say like I think we can do better here in this thing, because we always can. So I think we're in for more chaos when it comes to what people choose to believe. And for myself, I know that whatever I'm holding that I quote unquote believe right now, I know that if I look back in my life 10, 20 years, I believed some other things that maybe I'm embarrassed about now. So I can only assume that whatever I believe now, 10, 20 years from now, I'll be like, boy, I was so young. Right? So it helps me loosen the grip a bit on my assuredness on what I think I know with a little k. Because what I know with a capital K, I know in my heart. And those are the things that you can't put your finger on. And I can't just write it into a sentence for you. But it can be a North Star. It can be a compass for you to navigate the seas of assuredness and chaos and this truth and that truth. But until we have abilities to kind of titrate all this information that is coming our way, the only person right now that can do that is the individual. And that has never been more important than for you to decipher and come up with good ways to get information that you can trust. And that is not easy to do these days. But and it's probably going to be an issue of less versus more, to be sure. So it's not about putting your head in the sand. But I don't have the complete answer for it's like, oh, you just use this service or that or this app or this journalist. It's like it's going to be a combination of things and it's going to change over time. And there's a responsibility of citizenship now as a global citizen. I think that requires we all sharpen the blade by looking at like, this time of apocalypse. It's a time of it's meaning revelation. And it is revealing to ourselves what are our individual blind spots. And that is a wonderful invitation. Now, for a lot of folks, they don't even see that or don't even want to see it. They continue down, letting other people sort of create more blind spots for them and identify with it. But I think if you want to walk through this with the most grace and be of the most service, you have to look at your own first. And we have to be able to be friends with and hold in our community those that we don't agree with completely. And that's something I think we can practice because it's not helping us right now that we just sort of say it's my way or the highway. And I've had to try to put this into practice myself where there's people that are saying things that I really don't agree with.
Yeah,
But
same.
there's many other things about them I do, We have a lot in common, but I'm like, wow, I feel like we're on different planets about this something. Maybe it has to do with COVID or whatever. And I'm trying to work with my sense of righteousness. And I think it was Raghu Marcus was saying on his podcast about that being the golden chain in India, and it being the like the main obstacle to spiritual growth is righteousness. And I've been thinking a lot about that. So that's sort of a few thoughts about it. I don't have an answer. I don't know if there is one. But it's something that I think has to do with the kind of unveiling that we're going through.
Yeah, word. I feel you on that, and I really appreciate the clarity, the wisdom and clarity there. At the same time, not clinging to your notions, not clinging to your thoughts, not being. That's a fine balance, isn't it? Of
It's hard to do.
it's hard to do. It's hard to do. I
You
mean,
don't
we're
even realize
so,
you're doing it sometimes, and
and it's very tribal. It's very tribal
yeah,
to have that knee jerk reaction of we don't have the same viewpoint. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. I don't want to hang out. I feel that in me as well, and I've witnessed that in me too. That automatic default of self righteousness, and I don't really feel like hanging out with you now. Now that you've said that, but I love him dearly, and it's been good for me to work on as well, and actually had some great conversations through it. But the initial reactivity and navigating that and working with that and then teasing it apart and it feels like quite a necessary skill right now for me.
yeah, you have to recognize that you choose to believe things. Many people think I believe that because it's true,
Mm.
and we choose everything. And I think if we, it brings the power back to say like, because look, you're never totally, you can never be 100% sure of anything. And I know that's a very incendiary thing to say, but at some level you have to say like, I'm going to hold this belief. And maybe you can play with like, well, I'm holding that mostly, but then I'll listen to others at the same time. It's
Mhm.
very easy to, the more things get polarized, to pick a side, right?
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
easy. And I would say, I guess I'm not MAGA, that's for sure. So I guess I do not choose to identify with that tribe. But I also don't fully identify with the mainstream corporate Democratic story. But at the same time, if anything, this time period has brought me perhaps a bit back to the center where I've felt I've gone through a few of my own illusions, and I've come a bit more to uh, being okay choosing to believe things that before I had more doubt about. Because I'm like Occam's razor probably says it's probably true. And so I'm gonna choose to ride with that for now. And it's okay if I learn new things in the future and shift that. Um, but there's a lot of delusion happening. And
There's a
we see
lot
that
of delusion.
in the spiritual community before all this, right? You see people who these are all just tools, and what do you do with it? Some people get deluded. And it's like, well, you know, usually when you start to wake up, you want to be in some kind of service, or because you realize there is no other game, and you actually start to feel really nourished by that. So if you find that some of the beliefs you hold are creating more division by the definition of them or in your mind, I would say you could maybe use that as a litmus test of if it's really serving you or others. I feel like truth, um, I'm going to say this. I have no idea if it's true. Truth is inclusive in a sense. There's an energy of inclusiveness,
Mhm.
but I don't know what that totally means. Like, I don't know if that's literally
Yeah.
true, but I feel it in my heart.
No, I hear you. I feel you on that for sure. It's high octane times. I mean, these platforms, the computer, the phone, I mean, the amount of information flying at one another. Like you were saying, we have a choice. at the same time, it seems when one doesn't have that blade sharpened, that discernment clear, and they are on the phone however many hours a day, flooding the mind with just shitty light, virtual reality, and just the nervous system has no sharpness to it, no robustness to it, and everything's sluggish and foggy. And there's just that influence through all these different polarized views, or maybe they have honed in on one particular rabbit hole. I think it can also get to the point where one's mode of like intelligent, discerning thinking and wisdom gets dulled, in which they're just feeding through whatever. I guess there's that initial choice, whatever they get seduced into, and then that becomes the kind of unconscious feeding of something, which I've witnessed a bit from a couple of dear friends that thought we were totally on the same page, totally in the same tribe, which we are, but then all of a sudden, like, holy shit, how did you get sucked down this particular thing? But I also like to catch myself out, like, well, like just a little bit of like, again, coming to that righteousness thing, maybe they're right on, maybe I don't have a clue.
Yeah,
But the
there's probably, you know, weavings of truth and all sorts of things. It's not, nothing's black and white anyway. Uh, but look, they give you the first drug hit for free, essentially, and then you start coming back for more. Um, but did you guys do you have that movie, The Social
Oh
Dilemma?
yeah, yeah,
Down that,
that was
that's
great.
powerful.
It was powerful, and needed. I mean, we needed that right then, as people were spending so much time on their phones, probably more than usual. It's like we needed that information, that credible sharing from those experts. I thought it was great.
Yeah, yeah. Tristan Harris, he's the dude, and I've been tracking his work for years. Crossed paths with him a few times at some conferences, and I think what he's been saying is really right on. And we're essentially becoming, we're well on our way to being quasi cyborgs and to being full cyborgs, and that probably is our future. It's pretty well underway at this point. It's just clunky that we carry it with us instead of it being part of us. I'm not saying that's good or bad, uh, but we are, talk about delusion. We've been told by the companies, everyone's, oh, there's nothing to worry about here. Just, just, yeah, it's just simple and everything's easy. Don't worry about it. It's like, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. This experiment we started about 10 years ago with the iPhone, and it has radically transformed what it means to be a human being on this planet. I think the information age, and before that, perhaps it was maybe the atomic age. Uh, Now it's the iPhone age. I mean, this will be the next great gestalt of humanity. And as you see them getting smaller and smaller in time, this is sort of like Robert Anton Wilson, or McKenna talked about this, Timothy Leary, the truncation of time to some concrescence, whatever that is, whether it's a singularity or I don't know. But maybe it's like, from our perspective, we experience time only inside, like we're on the train or on the plane moving, so we don't appreciate that we're going so fast, in a sense, because we're on the ship. And as it gets fractally down to this point in the center, there is no point of actual center. It's just getting faster and faster and faster and faster. But from our experience, it's just this reality. But we sense and we see the damage and the speed and the things flying off the car and the hubcaps going left and right, which is everything that's happening around us. And we have to recognize what's actually occurring, that we're on this parabolic ascension to something, or whatever it is. It just is. And here we are. So it takes an incredible sharpening of the human mind and the heart. So yeah, I think the yogis, you guys know this, and so we got to get everybody else on board to say, find your way so that you can hear. You can hear yourself and what's already there, and you can hone back into ground level, because there's going to be a lot of things grabbing for your attention, and you're needed.
Mhm. Yeah, right on. I can't help but think as well, like during this whole time, most yogis have adapted. A lot of yoga teachers are teaching online, and that's their main thing: teaching online, recording, sharing via these platforms. And for me, it's like the this again, the sharpening, this practice of utilizing these incredible tools we've been given. Like on one level, it's an exciting time of what's being transformed, and this iPhone age that we are in, and we're able to do this, and you're over the other side of the world, and we're able to tune into so much
Yeah,
wisdom, like all our great teachers, all the Ram Dass archives and Alan Watts archives, and like you name it, we can almost get it right now on our phone, which is very cool because we can feed our brain and feed our mind and feed our circuitry really good shit if we're able to have that discipline and use these as incredible tools to have great conversations and share your gifts, share your music, share your teachings, whatever you're doing. People are being very resourceful. At the same time, I can see it in me as well, like that very seductive edge to then get just stuck on the phone, stuck on the computer. It's so seductive. It's so magnetizing, even though I am aware of it. And
yeah,
more often than not, I make a conscious choice, like, nah, like we've done our time on it, we've done the research, we've done the broadcast, like put it down and go play with the kids, go live. But I still can feel the pull back to it. It's
yeah.
very strong.
Very strong. Yeah, the greatest minds in the world are uh, messing with the chemistry of your brain for
Mhm.
addiction. That is the currency of our time, is your attention.
Your
So
attention.
that is 100% the currency.
Yeah.
So that's your power, is harnessing your attention. And that's what we've been, the sages have taught for millennia. If you bring your attention to one place, the doorway opens.
But they didn't have iPhones.
Yeah, well, it's no different. So it's sort of
No,
like
no,
it's we're amplifying that that is the great power in a sense. We've just turned it into a commodity.
totally.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said though, it's a good example that what's rising tides at the same time are all these wonderful things as well. How we can use these tools in other ways too. So the decentralization of things of information is also a positive. And you can take a hammer and build a house. You can take a hammer and hit someone over the head. So they're incredibly powerful tools.
Mm. East Forest, Krishna, Trevor. Um, while I say that, actually, do you find, just out of curiosity, do you find, depending on what name you are using, do you find you are slightly different or even radically different according to
Yes,
what your name you're using in that moment?
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've been going by Krishna for a few years now since Ram Dass gifted me the name, and I'm used to it. So when I hear the name Trevor, it feels heavier to me. It
Mhm.
feels strange, to be honest. But I have a lot of my old friends call me that. I don't want to force them into a new habit. I know it's awkward for them, but I find people do it that I don't know, and I'm sort of like, "Where are you getting Trevor from?" Or like, maybe I'm sure there's all sorts of things I have out there where I say that's my name or something, but to me, it's like a different lifetime. Feels like.
Mhm. Is there anything else you're excited about or working on right now, or do you have any upcoming online offerings? We'll wrap this up soon. I'd love to hear what's on the
Yeah.
cards for the year.
First thing up is a new record, and so I've got a new studio full length record that I'm just finishing the mastering on, and it should be coming out in probably I think February. It'll start rolling out. So I'm really proud of that and really excited to share that with people. And it's something I worked really hard on a lot throughout the pandemic. And I did get like string players and some friends to play on it. It was tough, but I managed to get it done. And I've got some collaborations that I'm excited about. There's one more Ram Dass track coming out that's collaborative. That's exciting, and many other things like that, including some touring. I hope later in the year that's at least COVID compliant for the United States. And as soon as I'm able to travel, I would really love to come back to Australia. Uh, really, really, really. I mean, I was planning on doing it, so I'm hoping they'll allow me in, and we can all hang out again.
Hope so too. Get you over to the West Coast as well. Lots of people. You'd be amazed, like how many people have asked, like when you were doing the Australian tour, like because they knew you'd been on the podcast a couple of times, and they were asking like if you were going to come over to the West Coast. And there's a lot of people wanting it, and it's such a powerful. And I've been privileged enough to experience it firsthand what you do, and it's so beautiful and powerful and really bow to you, man. So keep it up and super beautiful. We've been playing your record, like all of it, but we've got the actual vinyl version of the Ram Dass collaboration recordings. It's such a beautiful pressing, man. It's such a beautiful piece of art, and that vinyl is just gorgeous. We've had that almost on repeat for since we got it, you know.
Yeah, the second pressing I think comes out in mid-February. I know it's really expensive to ship it to Australia, but nothing I can do about that yet until we find an Australian distributor.
Mm-hmm. It's good quality though, like it's thick, like good vinyl, so it can handle the shipping. Some of the thinner pressings just can't handle the international trip, but that one handled
Double
it
vinyl,
well.
so that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Krishna, much love and similar love to Radha, and thank you so much for connecting.
Thank you.
Yeah, you take care.